WTCO. Green and orange, you look like a pumpkin.
I do. Springtime. Pumpkin. I'm
getting there.
pumpkin-esque.
It's getting there.
You know, I worked for hours and hours and hours
On
this
your
morning.
hair? On your hair?
On my hair,
no.
and now I have to put this thing on, and it's ruined. It's ruined.
And you know, the trouble is, we don't have the budget for hair and makeup like, you know.
No. I have to hang upside down to get any body on my hair. And
Like
then,
a bat.
And then my eyes get red, and I get this headache, and 10 pounds of hairspray, and
What we go through for this show.
I mean, really, it's.
And what is this show?
This is the History Files. You thought we were going driving today. Not today, folks.
Not today, no. But I have to say, I've had a lot of people approach me lately, and they're ready for me to get back on, the road. They really would like us to get out there again.
Well, and you know, Nancy's been doing a little bit of traveling, and I've been running around, and you know, there's lots of stuff that goes on here and there.
And it's kind of brown. I was kind of hoping it would green up a little bit.
We got greens.
Yeah.
We got the greens, and we got a little bit of bright orange.
Yeah.
To brighten our day. I figured I'd wear my brand new sweatshirt before I got it all, you know, like chored up and stuff.
And I'm hoping, Mary, that after today's show, that I am not going to have Norwegians chasing me down the street with sticks and clubs. Because
their holiday's coming. Nancy.
I know, but
It's
I
coming.
am throwing out a really provocative theory today.
And once again, she has given me El Zippo, not the dog zip. She's given
outside,
me
yeah.
zero information about our topic for today. So if I seem surprised, I really am.
Because this is our St. Patrick's Day program.
Yes, because it is the month of March.
And I'll have to say welcome in Irish, which is Felcha.
Felcha.
And if I say any of these Irish words wrong, and if there's any native Irish speakers around here, they can come after me.
Go after her on Facebook.
I tried.
Tear her down. Make her say words correctly.
And I want to ask Mary, what do you know about St. Brendan?
St. Brendan. Wasn't he the fella that drove away the snakes?
No, that was St. Patrick.
Oh, yeah, St. Patrick.
And I got to tell you,
see,
folks.
I'm confused because we're dressed up in St. Patrick's Day.
Right.
But St. Brendan, he did some pretty cool stuff too, didn't he?
He did. And before we go on, I got to tell people about my good friend Mary. Last year when we talked about St. Patrick chasing the snakes out of Ireland,
yes.
she was worried about the snakes. She was worried that was some kind of a bunch of snakes that were just,
mutants.
Well, either that or they were just destroyed and they were just wiped out. And
extinction.
yeah, and Mary works for the DNR, so I'll bet you that these days, if St. Patrick was trying that again, he would have to take out a bunch of permits.
He would have to do an environmental impact statement.
Right. He would.
Or a natural resource review or something. There would be forms.
Yes. Yeah, oh gosh,
There
yes.
would be forms. Incidental take forms.
And we're getting so high tech here. I'm going to use the timer on my phone.
Oh boy, now we've got an electronic clock.
And I hope it's going. Let's
What, did
see
you
here.
break the kitchen timer throwing it
No,
at Larry or something?
No.
Duck, Larry, duck.
But today we're going to talk about St. Brendan, the mystery of St. Brendan. And he's not somebody that everybody has heard about. But he was born a long time ago. He was born in 484. So
Okay.
that's a while ago.
Yeah, that ticks back a few notches on the old clock.
Yeah.
This morning we sprung forward.
Yeah, we went forward.
We went forward, not back. Now we're going back in time, folks. 1400s.
And St. Brendan was from the west coast of Ireland. They're not sure where. Maybe Kerry, maybe Galway. Doesn't really matter. And he died in 577, so he had a really long life back then.
Yeah, for that time period.
You bet. People didn't usually live that long.
He had the Holy Spirit watching over him.
He was something else. He became a monk at the age of 18.
So that's pretty young to commit yourself to
Yes.
the cloth.
And at that time, Christianity was really new in Ireland.
Okay.
It was a new thing. And the Irish had the idea that the way that you were a good Christian and how you got closer to Christ was you should suffer. That, yeah,
okay.
by
That's where
suffering.
the angry God kind of comes in.
Yeah, the self-mortification,
Okay,
that the more that you were, abstaining for things and trying to keep your life real simple and plain and austere. And if you suffered doing it, that was good because that meant that you were showing some sympathy because Christ had suffered.
Oh, right. Definitely.
So that was what they did, which was pretty hard on people.
Oh, I'm sure it was in the day. I mean, it's not like they had easy living to begin with.
No.
There was no, just go adjust the thermostat. Most of those folks at that time were probably living like in sodden huts, weren't they?
Oh, probably. Yeah, I'm sure it was very primitive anyway. But Brendan, I guess he was really a good monk because he became an abbot, which is like, the head of a monastery.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
And what he did, he's called Saint Brendan the Navigator. He liked to sail.
Seafarer.
Yes, he had sailed around Scotland and the UK and Wales. But then he had heard from this Saint Finbar that if he went to the west,
If you get the saints together, there's going to be trouble going on.
they told him if he went to the west far enough, he would find this paradise, this wonderful land.
To the west, far enough.
Yeah. And so Brendan and 13 monks set out in one of these, they're called curraghs.
Okay.
And what they are, at that time, they were leather boats.
Oh boy.
Small-
Taking on the Atlantic Ocean or the
In a
North
leather
Sea
boat,
in a leather
yeah.
boat. Oh.
A leather boat, because this was before, they did a lot of metal working and plastics and all that kind of stuff. So they had set out on this trip, and they said they left in 564, so he wasn't a young guy at that time.
No.
And that he sailed for 13 months, and he was gone, well, I should say, no, he was gone for 14 years, they said.
He was gone for 14 years.
Yeah.
What year did he leave? 15?
564.
Oh, 564.
Right.
Okay.
Of course, it seems like their numbers and things are,
Their calendar was different.
well,
Maybe?
that and yeah,
Do we
I
know?
don't think they were real precise, but anyway, they sailed in this curragh, which is this little leather boat, he and these 13 monks. And they went north, and first one place they came to what they described as the island of birds and sheep.
Oh, okay.
And what they figure was that was the Faroe Islands.
Okay.
Okay, which are up there. And then from there, they kept sailing west, and they talked about going by this land where there was fire shooting into the air.
So that would be Greenland?
Iceland, I think,
Iceland.
because Iceland's got volcanoes.
Yes.
And then farther they went west, they came into what they called all these places with crystal pillars, and they figured that
pillars.
what that was probably icebergs.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So are they North Atlantic Sea
Yeah,
probably
they're
at
kind
that
of-
navigational timestamp?
They're kind of island hopping.
Okay.
Faroes to the Iceland, and then to Greenland, which had these icebergs and everything. And then as he kept going, well, they had an incident where the monks had gotten up and off their boat and tied up to what they thought was a small island. And they started a fire so they could make some
Oh
food.
boy, fire season, folks.
Well, all of a sudden, the island took off. And it turned out that what they had done was they'd gotten off on a whale.
Oh, seriously? They built a fire on the back of a whale?
Well, no wonder the whale
I
left.
mean, really? Come on.
Anyway, the
No wonder
whale wasn't
wildlife
happy.
hates man.
But
Jeez.
they got back on the boat and they kept going. And they talked about going through a lot of darkness and fog and some storms. But they finally, and they also talked about going by a land that had these beasts that had tusks and speckled, and they figured that that was like seals and walruses in Greenland.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because they had, of course, being from Ireland, they had never seen walruses, I would
Walruses
assume.
and
Yeah.
sea lions and the like, right? Seals?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they talked about sailing into areas where the water was transparent and beautiful. And so that could have been off the coast of Canada or maybe farther south.
Now, Newfoundland is in there someplace too, isn't
Yep.
it?
Yeah.
The Newfoundland coast?
Right, right. Yeah.
And there's a lot of estuaries that
yeah, it's an island.
that were probably big enough that they didn't even realize they were out of the ocean.
I'm sure.
Yeah, wow.
And then they were disappointed because they thought that this island paradise that was too vast, and it wasn't
too
any
big.
way that they were going to be exploring it, or what they were really looking for was a place where these monks, they could stay
And settle.
and they could deprive themselves and just spend their life in prayer.
I would think that kind of trip on a leather boat would be
Enough? Apparently
you want
not.
punishment. 13 people on a boat with no indoor facilities. I think that would be pretty torturous.
Well, apparently it wasn't, but they returned to Ireland.
It's not torturous enough.
Well, like I said,
Oh,
that was
boy.
how they did it back there. in
Early
those days.
Christianity. There we
Yes.
go. Okay.
But they sailed west back to Ireland, and there are trade winds that would push them back
Right.
there.
Right. So, did they use moon and stars to navigate?
Well, they did not have GPS.
Well, this is true.
They did not have radar.
No MapQuest.
Nope,
No,
nope,
none of the
nope, none of
amenities.
that. And they talked about. Now, I don't think that Brendan wrote this account himself. It sounded like he had, talked and
Somebody else recorded.
somebody else recorded it for him.
That would make sense.
But they said that by the 8th century, this manuscript, which was called the Navigato, there were 122 copies of it in Ireland and Europe,
Okay.
and it was all about this voyage that he had. So it was pretty well known.
Right.
Yeah, it wasn't a secret thing. And the thing about this manuscript, too, is it did not have a lot of miracles and things happening that were real supernatural. It was pretty much a
MapQuest.
straightforward tale of their voyage.
Oh, wow, that is pretty impressive. You wonder if that document, being as there was only a few hundred or 100 copies made, if that was let's keep it from the people, because if people leave, you lose control, right?
Well, I suppose.
And maybe they wanted to keep people on that island. Nancy, we're going to keep them here.
How many people were going to get into a leather boat and start sailing?
Or did the English get a hold of it? Well, we know how that all boils down,
But it wasn't, this story was around
Okay.
of this Navigato. There were copies of it, and it was fairly well known. So, but the idea for a lot of people was, the Irish setting off these monks in a leather boat and going to the United States. Oh, that's
Kind
this
of,
pure, moonlight. However,
Pixie dust.
yes, in 1976, there was a young man named Tim Severin, and he was kind of an adventurer,
Okay.
did things like this. And he read the Navigato, and he was convinced that he wanted to replicate this voyage to prove that it was possible, that it could have been done.
And this was in 1976?
Yes.
Okay, so here we're on the next adventure.
Yes. Now, he wanted to make this leather boat, he wanted to make it as authentic as possible. So, well,
Did they have good notes? Engineers usually write stuff down, don't they?
somebody must have. He got 49 ox hides.
Wow.
And he had them tanned using oak bark, which is what they would have done
In the day,
right?
yeah.
When Brendan was around. They used flax for ropes
Okay.
and linen for the sails. And so they really, there wasn't any plastic or metal.
Right.
In fact, it said, I got to get the right, it said they used 2 miles of leather thongs to tie, how do you keep these,
Pieces together.
how do you keep these hides on there? They had to sew them, and so they used leather thongs. And
Wow, that's a lot of work.
yeah, 2 miles of it, actually, and these 49 hives. And so they built this boat and tried, like I say, make it as authentic as possible. And they were down in Cary, which is on the west coast, and the local fishermen there used boats that were made out of canvas, but they were really in the same style as these old leather curraghs.
So there was a sort of a pattern to go on.
Right, they had something to look at. So they tried it, and they, I think he had 5 guys that went along with him in this boat, which ended up looking like a banana, really.
Okay.
So, of course, it was probably a little more modification on it than what Brendan had, because they did have, like, I don't know, tarps or something where they could get under there out of the rain and
The elements.
yeah. Now, have you ever been out sailing on a boat on the ocean?
Not on the ocean. I've been on some pretty big lakes.
Lake Marinuka.
Lake Marinuka, Bugle Lake, Lake Arbutus,
There you go.
Lake Henry, Lake Martha. No,
I'm sure that's comparable.
I've been on some pretty big lakes where you can't see shore, and it gets a little scary. I mean, for me, because I'm not, a seafaring navigator.
Well, I certainly am not. I mean, let's consider where we live. We're about as far away from the ocean as you can get in the United States.
Absolutely.
So when I read the book about this Tim Severin's trip, and I've got it right here behind me, it's called The Brendan Voyage, and it's a really good read. It's even if you don't know anything about sailing on the ocean. So he did manage.
The signs that they were. Those are religious signs right there.
Yeah,
right
the
there.
Celtic cross.
Celtic cross.
This is a picture of them working on these hides and trying to sew them together. Which
Well,
was
and
not
my
easy.
question to you is, how did they seal them?
Oh, that's right. They used sheep tallow.
Sheep tallow to
Yes.
seal them.
And lanolin, yeah.
Wow.
So they said it was incredibly smelly.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. Of course, I think they kind of got used to that, but that's
Yeah.
what they waterproofed the boat with.
With tallow.
Because what else would they have used back then in 564?
Well,
They used lanolin, yeah, from the sheep, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I wonder if they made it into like a paste or something.
It sounded like they painted it on, that maybe they kind of melted it and then painted it on.
Interesting. If somebody knows anything about how to seal up a leather boat
Right.
with sheep tallow,
Yeah.
let us know.
This is a picture of the boat was upside down here, and it
Okay.
shows all these leather thongs that they were wrapping it together and tying. It took them a long time to do that, and they.
Well, it looks like it's a pretty big boat.
Well, it wasn't. It was not huge, I'm afraid. But
Oh,
here, now
okay.
you can see the boat, and
Yeah, now there's perspective.
it took a long time to sew these hides because you had to do really tiny stitching.
Well, and I bet you, the way the picture looks, Nancy, I bet you they've got 2 layers of hides on there. Doesn't it look like this is overlaid?
It could have been. I know they probably overlapped them, and they used the wooden, what do you call that, lath that goes
Yeah.
on to make the structure. They had talked to some old timers, and they said you had to get ash trees, but you had to take the wood from the north side of the ash tree. They were very specific about it.
And now, does the north side, ooh, I'm losing my crown.
Uh-oh.
See, it always happens in the middle of a show. Something goes awry. This time I lost my crown. Is it because the tree grows slower on the north? This is not cooperating.
Well, either that or maybe it gets harsher weather. So I
okay.
don't know, but that was what the old timers told him. So he was trying to keep it authentic. He finally got this all sewed together, and this is what it looked like. Now these curras did not have a keel, and that's that thing that goes down the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so it wasn't. They didn't have a whole lot of steering. They could do it with the rudder and back.
Right.
And some rowing if they had to, but that was about it. So they weren't sure how this was going to go.
That's kind of tight sleeping quarters, I
Yeah,
bet.
but this is what it looked like when it was put together. So you can see it was not a huge boat by any means.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and it was like I said, I think it was 5 guys all together that were on there, and they set off from this stream down in County Kerry. It was called Brandon's Creek, and that was supposedly where Brendan had set off from. And this is a picture of the local farmers and fishermen, and I'm sure they're all looking at him thinking, okay.
I bet you they were placing bets.
They probably
Okay,
were.
we got 50-1 odds that these fellas are coming back
I can just hear them, can't you?
in their leather boat.
I know it. They're going to go all the way to the America in a leather boat. Okay.
That works.
But they did go off, and
Did they
this
make
is-
it back is the question.
here's the Brendan here on the left, and on the right is one of the more modern day curras, only
Okay.
made from canvas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but basically the same, only it wasn't with hides. So I think they had a pretty long, pretty big learning curve.
Absolutely.
With the
Well, and this boat is only carrying 5 guys
5
versus
to 6, I think. Yeah.
versus 13. So I wonder if the original boat was a lot bigger. Because this one doesn't look like it would hold 13 people.
Well,
Unless
that's
you
a good
stacked them with
point.
cordwood.
Yeah,
right?
we don't know the dimensions of the original St. Brendan's boat.
Okay.
He didn't put that in his Navigado, but
Well, and to get 50 steer hides, they probably got rid of all the steers that were in Ireland. Because they got a lot of sheep.
I think they tried to get the hides off some breeds that were old, really old breeds. So like they tried really hard to be authentic. And so they set out, and like I said, it was a learning curve because the Atlantic is a pretty,
It's got its own attitude.
got waves
It's like
and
Nancy on a
storms.
bad day.
Oh yeah, that's definitely me. I'm like the Atlantic Ocean. But they did learn how to sail it, and they actually found out that it handled pretty well because it was very flexible.
Oh, so
So
it would
when-
twist and turn
Yeah.
instead of break.
Exactly, and when it
Wow,
went
elasticity.
over these big waves, that's exactly what it did. They found out that really worked well.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, and so pretty soon they did make it up to the Faroe Islands, which, they're very remote.
Right, right.
Yeah, and they do have a lot of sheep. The climate's not the best. A beautiful place nonetheless, but a harsh climate. And they pulled into this island here that had a farm on it, and the people living there, they were the 18th generation on that farm.
Wow.
Yeah, 18 generations. So they'd been there a
They
while.
were a hardy bunch,
They
huh?
were there, and they are a hardy bunch. Yeah, you can see it's quite rocky and steep, and the weather ain't the best, but I guess it's beautiful. And they got another crew member there, a fellow from this farm, and he was kind of like a Viking. His name was Trondor. And
Ooh, Trondor.
yes, he knew how to navigate and everything and sail, and I guess he was really
I
tough.
bet you his ma and pa were not happy about him leaving the farm in the middle of chore time, taking off with a bunch of ruckskins,
Really?
ruffakins or whatever they call them.
And this shows Tim Severin's route where they took off from Ireland here and they went to the Faroes, and then the next place they went was Iceland.
Okay.
Where in the Navigado it had talked about there being, the mountains spewing fire and
Right.
molten, because there are a lot of active volcanoes, and this shows them coming into to Iceland. It's a real different country. It's like the moon because there aren't trees or
Right.
much growing there. Beautiful, but really different than around here. So they made it to Iceland, And they stayed there, they said, about 8 weeks just to make sure everything was.
Well, you got to rest up from something like this, don't
And
you?
they wanted to make sure the boat didn't have any damage or
Get
anything.
over
And they said it was
dysentery
fine.
and-
Yeah. They had gone over some terrible rough seas, and it was fine. It had never sprung any leaks.
That's amazing.
And their sails were just made out of linen, and but everything was working. And what was interesting is they found out, like, what did they eat? Well, they had taken a lot of packaged food and dried food and
Okay.
things, and they found out that was a real disaster. This stuff got wet and mushy.
Moldy,
And
probably.
they found out that things like, like jerky and fish that they caught and birds, that was fine, but a lot of this nice new processed food did not work
They
out.
were living on seabirds.
Yep. Oh yeah, here. Here.
Have some fish.
Have a seagull wing.
Have some fresh fish.
But like I say, the learning curve, they were figuring it out. And when they got past Iceland and got near Greenland, they got into a really severe storm. And they also found out that they weren't being tracked on any radar because the radar does not pick up a leather and linen boat.
Okay, well, it's not going to ping.
No, and they did have a radio, but there were lots of places where it just didn't work. You know?
Right.
Yeah, but because so there really wasn't anybody able to track them 100% of the time, so they were really out there on their own, but they were very skillful sailors.
Wow, that's incredible.
And they, when they went past Greenland, they didn't get too close because there were a lot of icebergs and ice that, in fact, one of them did kind of cut a hole in one of the leather hides.
Okay.
It wasn't too bad, and they were able to sew it up again, which is just amazing. Otherwise, this leather boat really, it held up.
That's incredible.
It is. It's just things that we don't ever think about being possible, but they are. And then from Greenland, where did they come next? They came to Newfoundland.
Wow, that's incredible.
They had made
What
it.
a journey.
Well, yeah.
In a leather boat that you made in your garage.
Right.
Do you think their wives or girlfriends were scratching themselves going, what are the guys up to today? Oh, they're building a leather boat.
Yeah, I wonder where they are now,
And we think it's bad when they go hunting for 7 or 9 days or whatever it is.
Well, yeah. This was a little more extreme, I guess.
Absolutely. How long did it take them to go?
It was several, they did take a break. They were in Iceland for, I think it was 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. But they said the boat, when it was really functioning in good weather, they could make over 100 miles a day.
Wow, so that's a pretty good track.
Well, they said it's comparable to a lot of modern yachts and things.
Wow,
You know,
there you
that have
go.
engines and whatever. So they did really well that way. This shows them when they came into to Newfoundland. And the thing that really got me was the Canadian Coast Guard had spotted them and radioed them, did they want any help? And they said, no, we're fine. We want to make it to shore here to prove, we did it.
Right.
And so the captain of the Coast Guard ship came out, and when he saw this little tiny boat, they said he teared up. He just couldn't believe it, that they had made it all the way across the Atlantic.
Emotional.
Yeah.
Trying to
He
tear.
got in this little, so here's a picture of when they reached land in Newfoundland. Here's the St. Brendan boat here on the right.
And they've got a whole party of
Oh, can you
onlookers
imagine?
and people cheering them on.
Remote, Newfoundland is a fairly remote place.
Yeah.
Not overpopulated, and
Strangers coming.
I'm sure they were so excited. Now here, this shows how tiny that boat really was. Here it is out in the sea. I mean, it's just a little speck, really.
It's down there on the bottom right.
Yeah, it's
It
not.
almost looks like you dripped a blib of coffee or something and tried to wipe it off like a little smear.
I know, it's just a little blip out there. It was just amazing, and that was a really good book because it talked about this whole, trip and trying to get there and what they had discovered. And they also found that the appropriate clothes to wear were like wool and natural fibers.
Oh, why?
Well, they did get wet, but they kept them warm.
Okay, because all of this is in like probably 50 degrees and colder
Yeah, right.
temperatures.
Especially when they got up there by Greenland, and that's.
Well, they're floating on water. That's
Yeah.
probably 36 degrees.
And there's icebergs and
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
So.
Definitely.
And they had one neat story. They said one day they were sailing along near Greenland, and along come this big whale, and he was hanging out with a bunch of porpoises.
Oh, okay.
Well,
They
when
were discussing the crazy guys
they
in the
were
leather
just
boat.
having a good time, and they said the whale peeled off from the porpoises and came over and checked out the boat. He went under it and around,
Oh, examining it.
and that. In the meantime, he said the porpoises were just going goofy. They were doing all kinds of jumps and tricks.
Showing off?
They were. He said they put on the most fantastic show.
Ancient aliens, porpoises. There you go.
And when the whale had seen what he wanted, he and the porpoises took off again.
Isn't that something?
I thought that was really neat.
A lot of those, aquatic animals are not afraid of people until something bad happens and they remember it.
And I think it was just really interesting because they are very intelligent animals.
And they like to check things out.
Yeah, and they did.
Curious.
They also had found out that actually there had been the Vikings, the good old Vikings, who St. Brendan was preceding by a while here.
Yeah.
Because the Vikings kind of used the same route to get there as St. Brendan did. They did the island hopping. They went to the Faroes. They went to Iceland. They went to Greenland. And then from Greenland, it's not that far over to the Canadian coast.
Right.
Yeah. But the Vikings in their sagas said that when they first got to Iceland and the Faroes, that they had found Irish monks there ahead of them.
Really?
Yeah.
So they did, either they left people behind, right? And they settled?
Or they just stayed. Yeah.
Or, wow. Or people, they made a second trip and, hey, let's the four of us go start up, what do they call them?
Well, I suppose it'd be like a monastery, but these guys were not into settlement. I mean, they were monks. They weren't going to be reproducing or anything.
And the fact that they were all in a period of sacrifice,
self-denial. They just wanted to get away somewhere where they
could suffer.
Right, they could suffer and they could pray all day. And the Vikings also said that when they had come to Greenland, they had found the remnants of some leather boats. And those weren't the kind of boats that the Eskimo, the Inuits at that time were using.
Right.
So it's possible they even got to Greenland. But what
and
would
settled.
they? Yeah.
And then.
Or while they were there,
and then they suffered.
Yeah. I don't think it's called they settled. They just suffered.
And then they suffered to death. And nobody found them for another couple hundred years until, the Vikings came through the door, right?
Right. And the Vikings, they called them papars, which means, like a priest or a father anyway. And the climate back then, in the 5th and 8th centuries, it was milder. It had fluctuated and fewer storms. So, it is possible that Brendan and his monks didn't have a real stormy sea.
Right.
That was a little easier. And when they talked about in the Navigado about encountering really thick fog, well, around Greenland and Labrador, it is noted for this really pea soup fog, very thick.
And that's because of the amount of ice. And if the days are warm, you get fog. We get it here. Right?
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it's so dense you can't hardly see out your windows.
And like I say, they did not have any navigational devices. If you are navigating by looking at the sun and the moon and it's thick fog, it's going to be interesting.
They're going to put the brakes on and maybe slow her down a few knots,
It's going to be interesting. And it turned out that there really had been, besides the St. Finbar telling Brendan that there was a land to the west. That there had been other rumors going around Ireland about lands to the west.
So do you think other people made that trip, but it was pre-written language?
Either that or they didn't make it.
Well, and if ocean levels were lower, there may have been more land bridges. You know,
Well, yeah,
I
we
mean,
don't
during
know.
the Ice Age
Yeah.
and stuff, you never know.
But I guess the underlying thing here was that Tim Severin proved that it could be done, that it was possible, right?
To make that trip.
It was possible. They could have done that.
So now, after he had his book published, here it is. We'll show it
Yes,
off.
it's a good book.
And did you get this from one of our local libraries that are precious commodities in our communities?
I bought it actually,
Okay.
but you could, I'm sure you could just order it from the library.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We need more books in our libraries, not less.
And
There's
it's,
my little political pitch.
it's really readable,
Okay.
even if you're not a navigator, you know, on
Okay.
the sea, like I'm not and you aren't. Well, she's navigated Bugle Lake, but aside from that.
I've got a canoe. I've got a canoe. Well, actually, my brother has a canoe. He lets me use it.
But it does, this map shows that this island hopping method was very doable, and that's what the Vikings did.
Well, and what an incredible journey, you know, to actually recreate as close as you possibly can something that I'm sure when they were putting it together, it had to seem like an impossible task.
Well, I'm sure. I just like what those Irish farmers watching them leave. You can just imagine what they were saying. Like,
Well, in the 1970s, these guys didn't have cell phones either,
no,
or you know, a radio.
because they were trying to be as authentic as they could.
Right.
And
So if
they-
they would have gotten
yeah.
in trouble out there, you know, there would have been somebody down the road who would have found a nice leather boat
Well, yeah,
someplace.
yeah, it was possible. That's what his voyage proved. And like I say, he tried to be as authentic as possible, using
Right.
the hides, the tallow, the thongs made out of leather, and the
That's-
ropes made out of flax.
That is just so cool because that's the materials that those craftsmen, and that's what they were. I mean, you go back to the 14th century, 5th century,
Well,
6th
this was the
century.
5th and 6th century when
Yeah.
he did this, yeah.
And to be able to replicate that in the 1970s, I mean, to even attempt it, I think is super cool. And what I find most intriguing about it, and I wonder why engineering, navigation, or, you know, seafaring engineers haven't figured out that we need to have twist in these vessels.
Right, that's what they said. It was supple. These
'Cause they
not
say
having the keel and having this leather, it was able to move and kind of slide over the waves.
Right.
Yeah.
And they say a lot of shipwrecks, especially the ones where they're carrying freight, like out on the Lake Superior, is what happens is they peak a wave and they crash and they split
Yeah,
because there's no give.
right, and that's why they were able to do it so well, and that was what they found out, was how
Wow.
these things would give. Yeah.
If you are a ocean faring engineer, you could make a lot of money with flexible boats.
Yes, and he had a hard time finding a place that he could get these ox hides that were tanned with this oak tannin. Yeah,
right.
But he had found a place in Cornwall, which is across the ocean in the south of England, and yeah, they, like I say, they were just trying to make it as alike as what Brendan would have had
Right.
to have used back there when he made his trip. So I believe it. I'm sure he did.
Well, they must have. They must have.
And here's where all the Norwegians were going to be chasing me around because they got there before the Vikings.
It's at this point in the program that we'll say that these are not the viewing opinions of WTCO
Right.
TV. We don't know who got there first. We're just sharing something that Nancy read in a book.
And I'm saying it's very possible.
Very
And,
possible.
of course, being monks, they really didn't leave much behind. They didn't.
They didn't have anything because they were in suffering.
They liked to, yes, they were in,
Permanent
state of
Lent.
denying themselves, and so they didn't build homes or anything. I mean, they were monks. They didn't have. They weren't
didn't
going to have
live in a
children or
hole.
wives or anything.
Well, I suppose they were dwelling. They had to have a dwelling.
But
of
they
some
didn't
form.
stay. They
Okay.
they thought that it was too big of a place, the United, this new continent over here, and so they went back to Ireland. And I just think it's a real interesting probability, and
Oh, yeah.
it's real possible that the Vikings, they were certainly all over Ireland and Scotland, had heard about this.
Well, and if they, if a boat full of monks
Yeah.
could make it, I think we could all make it,
I'm sure
right?
they did.
I don't know if I'd want to do it though.
And the Vikings, I'm sure, were very pragmatic, and if they had heard about this, I'm sure they paid attention to it
Oh,
and did not just
definitely.
poo-poo it. And they figured, well, if they can do it, we can too,
Well,
right?
and they probably figured, who followed the monks, and is there opportunity in this route for us to go and do a little old-fashioned pillaging? Yeah, you may have been there first, but we're going to take all your wares back with us.
And that's what, they found out. The Vikings did a lot of trading. They got wood from Newfoundland and Canada.
Oh, and I think the Vikings, they couldn't have been just the horrible people that they say they were with constant pillaging and taking women.
No,
and,
I'm sure that takes a lot of effort.
well, yeah, a lot
Yeah.
of calories, and
Yeah.
they might have been weak getting off the
Yeah,
boat. You never know.
Yeah, so maybe they didn't pillage quite as much.
Not as much. There we go.
But the monks were not into pillaging.
No.
They were pretty peaceful people.
And they had nothing to pillage because I'm sure that they took a vow of poverty
Yes.
to go in line with their lifelong vow to suffer.
Yeah, to be, abstinent. You're not going to be drinking or having
Talking.
girlfriends or maybe even talking a lot. That just,
Listening to
No.
music.
no, that back then, that's not what they did.
And when they knelt, they knelt on rock or stone.
Oh, I'm sure they knelt on sharp stones
And-
because they would have hurt them and that would make
And
them feel even
splintery
better.
wood.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure it was tough. So it's an interesting story for St. Patrick's Day. And I recommended this book by Tim Severin. And then there's another book called Haven,
Okay.
and that's by a lady called Emma Donahue. And that's a story of three Irish monks that set out, and they're going to go live on this rock out in the middle of the ocean, and so they can really suffer. And it's an interesting story, very interesting.
Boy, you gotta give them credit for, living on the rock.
Yeah,
Right?
for just, and seeking out hard times, which is not something we do a lot of these days.
No, we've got it pretty soft.
Yeah,
We've got
do.
it pretty soft.
So that's our story for St. Patrick's Day this year. And there's plenty of Irish in Trempealeau County.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. There's a lot of Irish, and there's a lot of Norwegians, and a lot of Poles, and a lot of Scots.
Now, there's also a story about a Welshman that made it to the United States.
Okay.
And I have yet to find one about a Polish sailor that made it to the United States before Columbus.
Before Columbus.
Yeah, but if you find out about one, then you let me know.
We'll keep digging.
Yeah, it's just an interesting topic. We were, when I was in school, they always taught us about, well, Columbus was the first one here, and now we
Right.
know that, no.
Well, and we're learning more and more every day while we dig through the layers of history as we find them.
Yeah.
They do renovations in some of these old European cities when they're, okay, this building's coming down or what needs to be replaced. And they find all these really, really cool, undiscovered archaeological things
Yeah.
that have been lost to the cover of
Yeah.
time.
And even in this country. I mean,
We haven't even started looking
Yeah.
as to what's underneath us. But we do talk about our soils, and we want them healthy.
Yeah, that's important. So we're gonna wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day, and in closing here, I'll play a little, Irish music and everything. And don't forget Norwegians, since the Vikings were running all around Ireland and Scotland.
That's right.
And they spread their
They spread their DNA.
their DNA all over. The red hair and the freckles.
Deoxyribonucleic acid. I remember that's what DNA. That's the long version. Deoxyribonucleic acid.
So if you're Norwegian, you probably have some Irish genes back in there too, So they're all kind of mixed.
We all come from the melting pot.
Yes, we are. We're just a big melting pot. But it is a very interesting topic.
And check out the book.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. Like I say, it was written in 1976. Very readable, and it's exciting. Great pictures. One of the guys that were on the boat with him was actually a National Geographic photographer.
That would add up. National Geographic's been taking pictures for a long, long time.
So I guess that'll be it for today on the History Files. And thank you for sailing along with us and St. Brendan and his 13 monks.
And the 13 monks. Away we go.
Yep.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Sláinte.
Meshkan himni smooth Brain lana godoni flash me Oh me mo khalim go Ala khoro khim fok yon targe